Michael Jordan sees a young girl denied access to the gym. What he says silences everyone. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan's story began in Wilmington, North Carolina, a small city where dreams of becoming a professional athlete seemed out of reach for most. Michael was born into a family that emphasized hard work, discipline, and resilience. His mother, Dolores, was a major influence on his life, shaping him with the values that would later define his journey both on and off the court. Dolores was determined to raise her children to be independent, strong, and self-sufficient. She had high expectations and made sure Michael, alongside his siblings, understood that they had to earn everything they got. Basketball was Michael's first love. From a young age, he showed an undeniable passion for the game. But his path to success was not as clear-cut as many might think. Growing up, he wasn't always the tallest or the most physically gifted on the court. In fact, as a sophomore at Laney High School, Michael was cut from the varsity basketball team. The rejection stung deeply, and for many athletes, such a setback could have been the end of their dreams. But for Michael, it was just the beginning of his journey. Instead of giving up, he used that rejection as motivation. The next year, he returned stronger, faster, and more determined than ever. His improvement was immediate and impressive. The same passion that had been sparked by the initial failure now drove him to prove himself to those who had doubted his abilities. By the time he was a junior, he was dominating on the court, earning a spot on the varsity team and making his presence felt in every game. He quickly became known for his scoring ability, his tenacity, and his hunger to win. Coaches and scouts began to take notice, and by the time he graduated, Michael was considered one of the top high school players in the country. Despite his success, Michael was never one to rest on his laurels. Even with the attention coming his way, he understood that talent alone wasn't enough to succeed. He knew that if he wanted to make it to the NBA, he would need to work harder than anyone else. His college years at the University of North Carolina under legendary coach Dean Smith proved to be the turning point in his career. While Michael had already shown signs of greatness, it was during his time at UNC that he truly began to hone his skills, develop his basketball IQ, and learn what it meant to play as part of a team. Under Smith's tutelage, Michael learned to balance his incredible individual talent with a team-oriented mindset. He became more than just a scorer. He learned to pass, to create opportunities for his teammates, and to play unselfishly. His freshman year culminated in a national championship, a moment that solidified his reputation as one of the brightest stars in college basketball. That game-winning shot against Georgetown in the 1982 NCAA championship was a defining moment in Michael's career, showcasing not just his talent but his ability to rise to the occasion when it mattered most. As Michael's college career came to an end, the NBA draft loomed large. His stock had skyrocketed, and in 1984, the Chicago Bulls selected him with the third overall pick. The city of Chicago, struggling with mediocrity at the time, was hungry for a star. Michael's arrival brought hope to a franchise that had been in the shadow of the Celtics, Lakers, and Pistons. The pressure was immense, but Michael never flinched. He was ready. His rookie season was a preview of what was to come. He averaged over 28 points per game, instantly becoming one of the most exciting players in the league. His explosiveness, scoring ability, and competitive nature made him a sensation. But despite his individual success, the Bulls were still not a championship contender. Michael had the talent, but the team lacked the necessary pieces to compete with the elite teams of the NBA, particularly the dominant Pistons and the mighty Lakers. The individual accolades, while impressive, didn't satisfy Michael's drive. He had tasted success, but he was far from where he wanted to be. During those early years, the Chicago Bulls underwent a transformation. Michael wasn't just becoming a star, he was becoming a leader. His work ethic, relentless drive, and hunger to win became the blueprint for the Bulls' culture. But the team's struggles were a reminder that even the greatest players can't win championships on their own. Michael's development as a leader was critical to his success, as he learned to trust his teammates and push them to perform at their best. As Michael continued to improve, so did his influence on the team. The Bulls began to surround him with pieces that complemented his game, including the drafting of Scottie Pippen in 1987. Scottie was a player of immense potential, though he was still raw. Michael's leadership and the chemistry they developed helped Pippen grow into one of the best all-around players in the league. Together, they formed one of the most dynamic duos in basketball history. But it wasn't until the arrival of coach Phil Jackson in 1989 that everything clicked. Jackson, with his unorthodox methods and the introduction of the triangle offense, pushed Michael and the Bulls in ways they hadn't been pushed before. Under Jackson's guidance, the Bulls started to build something special. The triangle offense wasn't just about scoring, it was about creating balance, spacing, and unselfishness. Michael learned to embrace the system, which allowed him to elevate his game and his teammates' play. He was still the focal point of the offense, but he became more than just a scorer. He was a leader, a playmaker, and a defensive force. With Michael's individual brilliance and the team-oriented triangle offense, the Bulls were now contenders. The next few years were filled with challenges, but also immense growth. The Bulls faced tough battles in the playoffs, particularly with the Detroit Pistons. Known for their physicality and defensive prowess, the Pistons were the team that stood in the way of the Bulls' championship aspirations. The rivalry between Michael and the Pistons became one of the most iconic in NBA history. But after years of falling short, Michael and the Bulls finally broke through in 1991, defeating the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. It was a monumental victory, not just for Michael, but for the entire organization. They were no longer a team of potential, they were a team of champions. The Bulls went on to win the NBA Finals in 1991, and Michael was named Finals MVP. It was his first championship, but it felt like the beginning of something much larger. Michael had proved himself, not just as a player but as a winner. The championship was a long-awaited validation of all the hard work, sacrifice, and struggles he had faced. But for Michael, it wasn't enough. The hunger to win more titles, to prove that his greatness wasn't just a fluke, drove him forward. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in his legendary career. In the years following Michael Jordan's first championship in 1991, the expectations on him grew exponentially. No longer just a rising star, Michael had now established himself as the best player in the world, and with that distinction came the weight of expectations. The success of the 1991 season was not just a personal achievement for Michael but a signal to the basketball world that the Chicago Bulls, led by their superstar, were ready to dominate the league. But with success came challenges, and for Michael, it was clear that one title wasn't enough. The Bulls were on a mission to prove that their 1991 championship was no fluke, and Michael was determined to lead them back to the finals. But the path to another title was not without its obstacles. The competition in the NBA had grown fiercer, with teams like the New York Knicks, the Indiana Pacers, and the defending champion Detroit Pistons standing in their way. The rivalry with the Pistons, in particular, remained a painful reminder of the hurdles Michael and the Bulls had to overcome. Detroit's bad boys were a force to be reckoned with, known for their physicality and no-holds-barred defense. Michael and the Bulls had finally beaten them in 1991, but the Pistons were determined to make the road to the finals even more difficult for Chicago. The 1991-92 season was a continuation of the dominance the Bulls had shown the year before. Michael, coming off his first championship, played with an intensity that was almost unrelenting. His performances on the court were nothing short of spectacular, as he put up incredible numbers while making those around him better. The addition of key role players like the sharpshooting Steve Kerr and the versatile Tony Kukoc gave the Bulls the depth they needed to become a more complete team. Michael's unselfishness and willingness to trust his teammates became more apparent as the season went on. The chemistry between Michael and Scottie Pippen was stronger than ever. Pippen, who had already developed into one of the league's best all-around players, continued to evolve under Michael's leadership. Michael knew he didn't have to do everything himself. Pippen could handle the scoring when necessary, and his defense was a game-changer. The Bulls' offense, guided by the triangle system, was designed to work as a collective, and this team-first mentality was a direct result of Michael's growth as a player. As the season progressed, it became clear that the Bulls were the team to beat. They finished with a league-best record of 67-15, and once again, Michael's leadership was the driving force behind the team's success. However, despite the regular season dominance, Michael knew that the real test would come in the playoffs. The pressure to repeat as champions was immense, and no one knew that better than Michael, who understood that sustaining greatness was often more difficult than achieving it in the first place. In the 1992 postseason, the Bulls began their quest to defend their title with a tough series against the Miami Heat. Miami, led by the talented but youthful roster, proved to be a formidable opponent. However, Michael and the Bulls dispatched the Heat with relative ease, taking the series 3-0. It was clear that their experience and determination would carry them through the playoffs, but the real test awaited them in the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would face the New York Knicks. The Knicks were a team built on toughness and physicality, and their defense was one of the best in the league. Head coach Pat Riley had turned New York into a powerhouse, and they were hungry to dethrone the defending champions. The series was intense from the start, with both teams exchanging blows in what felt like a battle of wills. Michael was playing at an elite level, but the Knicks' defense, led by Charles Oakley and Patrick Ewing, made life difficult for him. Every basket Michael scored came with an added level of difficulty, and he had to rely on his teammates more than ever. Scottie Pippen stepped up in a big way, scoring crucial points and providing key defensive stops. In a pivotal Game 4, with the series tied 2-2, Michael showed why he was the best player in the world. In the final minutes of the game, with the Bulls trailing by 1, Michael hit a clutch jump shot that gave the Bulls the lead. That shot became one of the defining moments of the series, and with the Knicks out of contention, the Bulls advanced to the finals once again. The 1992 NBA Finals saw the Bulls face off against the Portland Trail Blazers. Portland, led by Clyde Drexler, had a potent offense and a talented roster. The series was expected to be a close one, but Michael Jordan had other plans. He had come to the finals not just to win but to prove that he was not only the best in the world but the best in every possible aspect of the game. Michael's performance in Game 1 was nothing short of legendary. He scored 35 points in the first half alone, and what stood out was his ability to do so in so many different ways: shooting, passing, and driving to the basket. What made Michael's Game 1 performance even more remarkable was the fact that he had not been known for his three-point shooting. But in that game, Michael went 6 of 6 from beyond the arc, a performance that left the Blazers stunned. His dominance throughout the series was overwhelming, and the Bulls took a commanding 2-0 lead. By the time the series returned to Chicago, the Blazers were reeling, and Michael was playing at a level that was nearly impossible to match. The Bulls won the series 4-2, with Michael being named Finals MVP for the second consecutive year. The 1992 championship solidified Michael Jordan's place as not only the best player in the league but also as a global icon. The victory was sweeter because it came with a renewed sense of leadership. Michael was no longer just the individual talent who could carry his team to a title. He had become the complete player, someone who understood the value of teamwork and leadership. His ability to elevate his teammates was on full display during the finals, where his unselfishness and trust in others allowed the Bulls to become a true championship team. But Michael's dominance wasn't just felt on the court. The success of his brand, particularly the Air Jordan sneakers, had taken the world by storm. Michael had transcended the game of basketball. He was now a cultural phenomenon, influencing everything from fashion to entertainment. His commercial appeal was unmatched, and his connection to Nike's Air Jordan line created a lasting legacy that would go on to shape the future of athlete endorsements. As Michael stood with his second consecutive NBA championship, he realized that he had accomplished something that few had ever thought possible. He had led his team to the pinnacle of success not just once, but twice. Yet, even as he stood at the height of his success, the hunger for more titles, more challenges, and more growth continued to burn inside him. The journey to greatness was far from over for Michael Jordan. After Michael Jordan secured his second consecutive NBA championship in 1992, the expectations surrounding him reached an even higher level. His accomplishments were already legendary, and the weight of maintaining that dominance was ever present. Michael had elevated the Chicago Bulls from a team of promise to an undeniable powerhouse. But with success came the realization that defending titles was often harder than winning them in the first place. The NBA was full of teams eager to knock the Bulls off their perch, and Michael knew that maintaining greatness would require more than just skill. It would require an unwavering commitment to excellence and leadership. The 1992-93 season was a new chapter in the Bulls dynasty, but it was also a time of personal reckoning for Michael. The pressure to win a third consecutive title, a feat that only a few teams in history had accomplished, weighed heavily on him. Yet Michael never showed signs of cracking under the pressure. If anything, he seemed to relish it. The hunger for another title fueled him even more, and he played with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the road to a third championship would not be easy. The regular season saw the Bulls again dominating the league. Michael, as expected, played at an extraordinary level. His scoring ability was as potent as ever, but it was his growth as a complete player that stood out. He was no longer just an elite scorer, he was an all-around force who could control the pace of the game, make plays for his teammates, and defend with a tenacity that few could match. His leadership continued to inspire those around him, and it was clear that the Bulls were on their way to another dominant postseason run. But despite their success, the challenges were evident. The Bulls' biggest hurdle remained the Detroit Pistons. The Bad Boys were a team that had defined the late 1980s and early 1990s with their aggressive, physical play. Despite Michael's brilliance, the Pistons had been the Bulls' biggest nemesis. The rivalry was deeply personal, with both teams understanding that their paths to a title would likely go through each other. The Pistons' defense, led by Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and Dennis Rodman, had been a wall that Michael struggled to break through in previous years. They were physical, ruthless, and intent on taking Michael out of his rhythm. In the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls and Pistons met again. The series was expected to be another brutal slugfest, and it lived up to the hype. The Pistons were not the same team they had been in their prime, but they were still dangerous. However, this time, the Bulls were different. Michael was playing at a level that had transcended anything the Pistons had encountered before. While Detroit still had the ability to frustrate him with their physicality, it was clear that Michael had grown as both a player and a leader. His ability to create opportunities for his teammates, even when the Pistons' defense swarmed him, became the key to Chicago's success. In Game 5 of the series, with the Bulls leading 3-1, Michael delivered one of his most iconic performances. The Pistons had pushed the Bulls to their limits, but in the deciding game, Michael poured in 29 points in the second half alone, leading the Bulls to a 108-105 victory. The game marked not just a victory over the Pistons but a victory over the demons of the past. The Bulls were no longer the team that had been beaten down by the Pistons in previous years. They had become the team to beat, and Michael's determination to lead them there was clear. The Eastern Conference Finals victory propelled the Bulls to their third consecutive NBA Finals. This time, they would face the Phoenix Suns, led by the dynamic duo of Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson. The Suns were a potent offensive team, and Barkley had enjoyed an MVP-caliber season. The finals were expected to be a challenge, but the Bulls were ready. Michael, who had faced numerous challenges on the way to his first two titles, now faced a different kind of opponent, one that required him to step up in new ways. The final series was a back-and-forth affair, with both teams trading punches throughout the series. Michael's scoring was crucial, but it was his leadership and the balance the Bulls had achieved that made the difference. The Suns, despite Barkley's efforts, couldn't contain the collective might of the Bulls. Michael's ability to elevate his teammates, particularly Scottie Pippen, was key. Pippen, who had become one of the league's top all-around players, took on more responsibility, especially when Michael needed help handling the Suns' defense. In Game 4, with the series tied 2-2, Michael had one of his most memorable performances. He scored 55 points, showing once again that when the stakes were highest, he could rise to the occasion. The series stretched to 6 games, and in Game 6, with the Bulls ahead 3-2, Michael delivered a masterful performance that sealed the championship. He scored 41 points, including clutch shots down the stretch, and the Bulls won 99-98, securing their third consecutive NBA title. Michael was named Finals MVP for the third consecutive year, making him the first player in history to do so. The victory solidified the Bulls as a dynasty and cemented Michael's legacy as the greatest player of his era. But as the celebrations subsided and the confetti fell, Michael began to face a new challenge, one that was more personal than professional. The toll that basketball had taken on his body, combined with the pressures of fame and the recent death of his father, began to weigh heavily on him. Michael's father, James Jordan Sr., had been a constant presence in his life, both as a supportive figure and as a guiding voice. When James was tragically murdered during the summer of 1993, Michael's world was shaken to its core. The loss left an emotional void that even his success on the basketball court couldn't fill. The 1993-94 season, as it turned out, would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Michael's career. Despite winning 3 consecutive championships, Michael announced his retirement from basketball in October of 1993. The decision shocked the sports world, but for Michael, it was a personal one. He had accomplished everything he set out to do in basketball. The loss of his father had given him a new perspective on life. Michael felt he needed to step away from the game to grieve and to find a new sense of purpose. In the time away from basketball, Michael turned his attention to a sport he had always loved, baseball. His father had been a huge fan of the sport, and Michael decided to give it a try. He signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox and spent the 1994 season playing for their Double-A affiliate, the Birmingham Barons. The decision was a way for Michael to step away from the pressures of basketball, but it also allowed him to reconnect with the memory of his father. Baseball, with its slower pace and different rhythm, offered him the space he needed to process his grief and discover what life beyond basketball might look like. While his time in baseball would not yield the same level of success as his career in the NBA, it represented a crucial period in Michael's life. It allowed him to reflect on everything he had accomplished and, more importantly, it allowed him to heal. But even during his time in baseball, the pull of basketball never completely disappeared. Michael knew that his story in the NBA wasn't finished. His passion for the game, his competitive fire, and his thirst for greatness were never truly extinguished. He was simply waiting for the right time to return. Michael Jordan's time away from basketball was a period of deep reflection and personal growth. His decision to retire in 1993 after winning 3 consecutive championships with the Chicago Bulls wasn't one that he made lightly. The death of his father had hit him hard, and his decision to step away from the game was as much about finding peace and healing as it was about taking a break from the relentless demands of being the greatest player in the world. Baseball became his temporary escape, a way to honor his father's love for the game and to try something different after reaching the pinnacle of basketball success. Michael's venture into baseball, while never as successful as his basketball career, was a reflection of his relentless desire to challenge himself. He played for the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A affiliate of the Chicago White Sox, in the 1994 season. Though his statistics were far from stellar, his presence on the team and his work ethic were undeniable. Michael, even in baseball, was committed to being the best. He spent countless hours in the batting cage and took every opportunity to learn the nuances of the sport. His time in baseball was not about seeking validation, it was about taking time to breathe and experience something beyond the world that had made him famous. As the 1994 season wore on, Michael's passion for baseball was clear. However, the pull of basketball was never far away. He watched NBA games on television, and the competition, the energy of the crowd, and the challenge of winning it all remained part of his DNA. Even as he played baseball, Michael understood that basketball was a significant part of who he was. The fire to compete, to be the best, hadn't gone out, it was just waiting for the right moment to reignite. That moment came in March 1995. Michael announced his return to the NBA with the now iconic 2-word statement, "I'm back." The announcement shook the sports world. Fans were ecstatic to see the return of the greatest player the game had ever seen, and the Bulls, who had struggled in his absence, suddenly found themselves reinvigorated. Michael's return was not just a boost for the team, it was a statement to the world that he still had something to prove. The hunger for greatness was still alive within him. However, Michael's return wasn't seamless. He hadn't played in nearly 2 years, and despite his immense talent, there were obvious signs of rust. His body had been conditioned for baseball, not basketball. His first few games back with the Bulls showed flashes of his old brilliance, but it was clear that he wasn't yet in prime form. His timing was off, his shot wasn't as sharp, and his conditioning wasn't where it needed to be. The road to reclaiming his dominance was going to take time, but Michael's mindset was clear: nothing was going to stop him from returning to his best. The Bulls, under coach Phil Jackson, had become a different team during Michael's time away. The triangle offense had continued to evolve, and the team had developed a deeper sense of identity. Scottie Pippen, who had taken on a more prominent role in Michael's absence, had blossomed into one of the top players in the league. But while the Bulls were still competitive, the energy that Michael brought with him was unmistakable. His return injected new life into the team. Michael, while still adjusting, brought a leadership and a competitive intensity that transformed the team's culture. His work ethic became contagious, and his presence made everyone around him better. The belief in the team's ability to win a championship grew stronger with every practice and every game. The 1995-96 season began with high hopes for the Bulls, but there were still questions about Michael's ability to return to his previous level of dominance. The expectations surrounding his comeback were immense. People wondered if he could get back to the peak of his powers. But as the season progressed, it became clear that Michael was not only back, he was better than ever. His scoring ability was as prolific as it had been before, and he had refined his game in ways that made him even more dangerous. His jump shot had improved, his passing became sharper, and his defense was as tenacious as ever. The triangle offense, under Michael's leadership, ran smoother than it ever had before. The Bulls finished the regular season with a then-record 72 wins, the best record in NBA history at the time. Michael was playing at an MVP level, and his leadership on the court was unquestionable. His ability to elevate the play of his teammates was a testament to his growth as a leader. The team had become a cohesive unit, with each player understanding their role and the importance of selflessness within the system. Michael, who had once carried the weight of the Bulls' success almost entirely on his shoulders, had learned how to trust his teammates and rely on them when necessary. His relationship with Scottie Pippen had reached new heights, with both players pushing each other to be the best versions of themselves. The postseason was a continuation of the dominance that the Bulls had shown in the regular season. In the first round, they dispatched the Miami Heat in 3 straight games, with Michael playing with the same intensity that had made him a household name. The Chicago Bulls were on a mission, and nothing was going to stop them. In the Eastern Conference Finals, they faced the Orlando Magic, a team that had shocked the league with their rise to prominence. The Magic, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway, had one of the most potent offenses in the league, but they were no match for the Bulls. Michael was dominant in the series, and the Bulls clinched the finals berth in 4 games. The victory was a testament to their collective effort and Michael's unyielding commitment to greatness. The 1996 NBA Finals was the culmination of everything the Bulls had worked for since Michael's return. The Seattle Supersonics, a team known for their defensive toughness, presented a formidable challenge. Led by Gary Payton, the Supersonics were one of the best defensive teams in the league, but they couldn't contain Michael. Despite the Supersonics' best efforts, the Bulls overwhelmed them in 6 games, with Michael leading the charge. His scoring, leadership, and ability to perform in clutch moments were on full display. He had returned, and in doing so, he had brought the Bulls back to championship glory. Michael was named Finals MVP for the 4th time, and the Bulls had achieved the ultimate goal, a championship. The 1995-96 season was not just about winning a title, it was about redemption. Michael had returned to the game he loved, and in doing so, he had shown the world that no challenge was too great for him. His comeback had solidified his place as the greatest player in NBA history, and it had ushered in a new era of dominance for the Bulls. As Michael stood with his 5th championship ring, it was clear that his impact on the game extended far beyond his statistics. His return had revitalized the Chicago Bulls, and in doing so, he had cemented his legacy as the greatest player of all time. His journey had come full circle, and though his career had been filled with incredible highs, it was his resilience, leadership, and unrelenting drive to be the best that truly defined him. For Michael Jordan, the story of his greatness was far from over. The 1996 championship solidified Michael Jordan's place in basketball history as the greatest player of his era, but the journey didn't end there. With his fourth NBA title, Jordan had proven that he could return to the game and lead a team to victory, even after stepping away for a season and a half. Yet, despite his tremendous success and the Bulls' dominance, the pressures of constantly being the focal point of the basketball world began to take their toll. The 1997-98 season marked the last of Michael's run with the Bulls, and it was evident from the start that this would be a season of reflection as much as it was about competing for yet another championship. The Last Dance documentary, filmed during the 1997-98 season, captured the essence of this final championship run. The title was fitting. This was, after all, the end of a dynasty. The media attention surrounding the season was unprecedented, as everyone understood that this could be the final chapter in a story that had defined basketball for a decade. The expectations were enormous, not just for Michael but for the entire team. They were chasing a sixth championship, which would add to their already impressive legacy of dominance. But with the spotlight on them, tensions began to build, both on and off the court. The Bulls roster in 1997-98 was a mix of veteran leadership and young talent. Michael's longtime teammate, Scottie Pippen, was still playing at an elite level, but his relationship with management had become strained. Pippen, once considered one of the top players in the league, was frustrated with his contract and the lack of recognition for his contributions. The tension between him and the front office was palpable, and it was clear that Pippen's future with the team was uncertain. Yet despite this, Pippen continued to give his all for the team. The bond between Michael and Scottie had been built over years of success, and their synergy was essential to the Bulls' championship aspirations. Dennis Rodman, another key piece of the puzzle, was as unpredictable as ever. Rodman, the league's most eccentric player, had continued to play his role as one of the best rebounders and defenders in the game, but his off-court behavior often caused controversy. In 1997, he had taken a brief hiatus from the team, leaving to go to Las Vegas in the middle of the regular season. Michael and the rest of the Bulls were frustrated by Rodman's antics, but they also understood that Rodman's unique skills were invaluable. His ability to control the boards, his ferocious defense, and his experience in the finals were qualities that could not be easily replaced. The team's struggles, both on and off the court, began to become more apparent as the season wore on. Michael, who had always led by example, now had to take on a more vocal leadership role. He had always been able to inspire his teammates through his work ethic and competitive spirit, but this season, there was a sense of unease. Michael was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of trying to maintain perfection was wearing on him. But despite the weariness, Michael never faltered. He continued to lead by example, putting in the work, demanding more from his teammates, and playing with the same intensity that had made him a global icon. As the regular season drew to a close, the Bulls secured the best record in the NBA, finishing with 62 wins and 20 losses. Yet, despite their dominance, it was clear that Michael was beginning to feel the toll of the journey. The constant scrutiny, the demands of being the best, and the pressure of knowing that this would be his final season were taking their toll. But as always, Michael remained focused on the goal, to win a championship. The Bulls began their playoff run with a first-round series against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers were a tough, defensive-minded team, led by Reggie Miller, but the Bulls were simply too much for them. Michael was playing at an elite level, and despite some close games, the Bulls advanced with relative ease. The win was expected, but it was clear that the intensity would only increase as they moved further into the playoffs. Michael and the Bulls were now facing the real challenge. The path to the finals would not be easy. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced off against the bitter rival, the Indiana Pacers. The series proved to be one of the toughest tests the Bulls had faced in years. The Pacers pushed them to the brink, forcing a 7-game series. Reggie Miller was playing at an incredibly high level, and the Pacers' defense had improved to the point where they could challenge the Bulls on both ends of the floor. But even as the Pacers fought tooth and nail to stop them, Michael and the Bulls refused to back down. Michael's leadership in Game 7 was the difference, as he scored 45 points and was instrumental in the Bulls' victory, ensuring that they would make it to the finals once again. The 1998 NBA Finals would be the last chapter in Michael's storied career with the Chicago Bulls, and the opposition was as formidable as ever. The Utah Jazz, led by John Stockton and Karl Malone, represented one of the most balanced and talented teams in the NBA. They had come close to winning a championship in previous years, but this was their year to shine. The Jazz, with their high-level execution and talented players, would provide the perfect foil for the Bulls. In Game 1 of the Finals, the Bulls took control early, but the Jazz were not going down without a fight. The game was close, and it came down to the final minutes, where Michael's clutch performance took center stage. He scored key baskets down the stretch, including a critical three-pointer that sealed the game for the Bulls. But the series would not be a cakewalk. The Jazz were not intimidated by the Bulls' legacy and came into Game 2 with even more intensity. The finals continued to be a battle of wills. Michael's leadership was evident in every game, but it wasn't just his scoring that made the difference, it was his ability to control the flow of the game and elevate the performance of his teammates. In Game 5, with the Bulls leading 3-1, Michael delivered another iconic performance. Despite the physical toll the season had taken on him, Michael played with the same intensity he had brought to the court throughout his entire career. The Bulls clinched their sixth and final championship in a dramatic Game 6, with Michael scoring 45 points and proving once again why he was the greatest player in NBA history. Michael's last championship with the Chicago Bulls was the ultimate victory, but it was also a bittersweet moment. He had fulfilled every goal he had set out to accomplish, and the desire to continue playing was no longer there. As he stood on the court, holding his sixth championship trophy, it was clear that Michael had reached the pinnacle of his career. His legacy was secure, not just because of the rings or the accolades, but because of the way he had changed the game. His impact on basketball, both as a player and as a leader, had been profound. He had raised the standard for what it meant to be great in the sport, and his influence would continue to shape the game for generations to come. Michael Jordan's retirement in 1999 marked the end of an era for the Chicago Bulls, but it wasn't the end of his story. His impact on basketball, on the culture surrounding the game, and on the world of sports was just beginning. The legacy of Michael Jordan wasn't just in the titles he won or the records he broke, it was in the mindset he created, the way he inspired others to strive for greatness, and the way he transformed the game of basketball into something that transcended the court. Michael Jordan may have stepped away from the game, but his influence would remain, forever etched in the history of the NBA. After Michael Jordan's second retirement in 1999, the NBA world was left in a state of disbelief. The game had lost its brightest star, and even though Jordan had already established himself as a global icon, his departure felt like the end of an era. For many, basketball would never be the same without Michael Jordan, and his absence left a void that was almost impossible to fill. The Chicago Bulls, once the dominant force in the NBA, were now without their leader. But even as Michael stepped away from the game, his legacy continued to loom large, and the impact he had made on the sport would resonate for years to come. Jordan's time away from the NBA was marked by his continued involvement in the game, but in a different capacity. He became a businessman, investing in various ventures, including his famous endorsement deals with Nike, which continued to thrive with the Air Jordan brand. His iconic shoes became a cultural phenomenon, and his face remained one of the most recognizable in the world. But for Michael, his connection to basketball remained strong, even though he wasn't playing. He continued to watch the NBA, seeing the game evolve with the rise of new stars like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. Yet, despite their brilliance, Michael knew the game was still missing something, the one thing that had made the NBA the spectacle it had become, him. It wasn't long before Michael began to consider the idea of returning to the game. In 2001, the unthinkable happened. Michael Jordan, now in his late 30s, announced that he would come out of retirement for a second time. This time, it wasn't with the Chicago Bulls, but with the Washington Wizards, a team that was in the midst of rebuilding. The decision to return shocked the basketball world once again. Fans were thrilled to see the greatest player of all time back on the court, while others questioned if he still had the ability to perform at the elite level he had set throughout the 1990s. Despite the doubts, Michael returned to the NBA with the same fire that had fueled him in his prime. He wasn't the same player he had been in the 90s, but he was still one of the best in the game. His scoring ability, leadership, and basketball IQ were unparalleled, even as the physical toll of age began to catch up with him. His jump shot was still deadly, and his ability to read the game and dictate the pace was as sharp as ever. But Michael wasn't the sole focus of the Wizards. He was now in a different role, one where his leadership would help mentor younger players while also contributing to the team's success. The Wizards lineup, led by a talented but improving group of players, was in need of guidance, and that's exactly what Michael provided. As the 2001-2002 season began, it was clear that Michael still had the ability to dominate. He averaged over 20 points per game in his first season back, and though the Wizards did not contend for a championship, they became a more competitive team with Michael's presence. His leadership, both on and off the court, had an immediate impact on the team. He pushed his younger teammates to elevate their games, much in the same way he had with the Bulls. While the Wizards did not make it far in the playoffs, Michael's return proved that he still had the ability to make an impact on the game, even in the later stages of his career. However, the physical challenges were becoming more apparent. Michael, who had always relied on his athleticism and competitive drive, found that the demands of playing in the NBA at the age of 39 were taking a toll on his body. Injuries began to mount, and though his basketball IQ and skill remained at an elite level, the physicality of the game had changed. The younger players in the league were faster, stronger, and more explosive. But Michael wasn't ready to give up just yet. He had already accomplished more than most players could ever dream of, but his competitive spirit remained. He wasn't playing for validation, he was playing because he still loved the game. The 2002-2003 season was Michael's final season in the NBA. He played one last year with the Washington Wizards, and though he was no longer the dominant force he had been in his prime, his legacy had already been cemented. The season was a bittersweet farewell, as fans packed arenas to see the legend one last time. While the Wizards didn't make a deep playoff run, Michael's final season served as a celebration of everything he had accomplished over the years. He played with the same passion and intensity he always had, and though his body was no longer capable of carrying a team the way it once had, his impact was still felt. He finished his career in the NBA on his own terms, not because he had to, but because he still wanted to compete. Michael Jordan's retirement from the NBA in 2003 marked the end of one of the greatest careers in sports history. Over the course of his career, Michael had won 6 NBA championships, 5 MVP awards, and countless other accolades. His dominance on the court was unrivaled, and his influence on the game of basketball was immeasurable. But even after his final game, Michael's legacy continued to grow. He had transcended basketball to become a global icon, a symbol of excellence, and an inspiration to countless athletes around the world. After his final retirement, Michael Jordan's involvement in the NBA didn't end. He became the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets in 2010, marking a new chapter in his basketball journey. As an owner, Michael took his decades of experience and knowledge of the game and applied it to shaping a new generation of players. He was no longer on the court, but his impact was still felt in the front office. The Hornets, under his ownership, began to develop a more competitive team, though they still struggled to break into the upper echelons of the league. Michael's involvement as an owner was different, but it was still driven by his desire for success. Through his ownership, Michael continued to influence the game he had loved so much. His presence in Charlotte, while not as dominant as it was in Chicago, showed that his passion for basketball remained. He wasn't just an owner, he was a mentor, a figure who had seen the game evolve, and he used his platform to make the NBA a better place. His role as an owner also helped raise the profile of the Hornets and brought more attention to the team. Beyond basketball, Michael continued to use his platform for philanthropy, supporting various causes, especially those related to education and youth development. His foundation worked to provide resources for underprivileged children and help them achieve their dreams. In many ways, Michael's legacy now extended far beyond the basketball court. His business ventures, charitable contributions, and mentorship to young players became as important as the 6 championships he had won. In the years following his retirement, Michael Jordan's influence on the game of basketball only grew. The league he had helped shape was now thriving, and younger players like LeBron James and Kobe Bryant were often compared to Michael in terms of their greatness. But the truth was clear: there was no one like Michael Jordan. His skill, drive, and leadership were unparalleled, and his legacy was cemented as one of the greatest to ever play the game. As the years passed, Michael Jordan remained a beacon of inspiration to athletes, both in basketball and beyond. He had proven that greatness was attainable through hard work, determination, and a refusal to accept anything less than the best. His career had shown the world what was possible when one person pushed beyond their limits and used their talents to not only achieve personal success but to inspire others to do the same. Michael Jordan wasn't just a basketball player, he was a living legend, a symbol of excellence that would endure for generations. In the years following Michael Jordan's retirement from the NBA, his legacy continued to influence the game in ways that went beyond what anyone could have expected. As a player, he had redefined the standards of excellence, and even in retirement, the echoes of his greatness still reverberated across the basketball world. With the rise of new superstars, the game had evolved, but Michael remained the gold standard. His influence extended beyond his 6 championships and his unparalleled skills. His work ethic, leadership, and the mentality he brought to the court had inspired countless athletes, and his influence was still being felt by both aspiring basketball players and established professionals. Although Michael had stepped away from the game, his impact was far from over. His ventures outside of basketball only added to his legacy. One of the most significant was his ownership stake in the Charlotte Hornets, a team he became the majority owner of in 2010. Taking on the role of an owner was a new challenge for Michael, one that forced him to navigate the business side of the sport. While he no longer laced up his sneakers for games, his competitive spirit remained intact. He approached the role of team owner with the same focus and intensity that had made him a legend on the court. The decision to become the majority owner of the Hornets was met with both excitement and skepticism. Charlotte, a franchise that had struggled for years to find its footing in the league, was now under the leadership of the greatest player in NBA history. Michael's presence brought a level of prestige and attention to the team that had been lacking in the years prior. The Hornets began to take on a new identity, one that reflected the winning culture Michael had instilled in the Bulls during his years there. He didn't just want to win championships as a player; now, he wanted to build a team that could sustain success long-term. Michael's role as an owner was different from his time on the court, but it still revolved around the same principles. He wanted to foster a culture of hard work, accountability, and teamwork. His experience as a player gave him unique insight into what it took to succeed in the NBA, and he used that knowledge to shape the Hornets. Though the team didn't immediately transform into a championship contender, Michael's leadership helped build a foundation for future success. The team's trajectory began to shift as he focused on player development, coaching staff improvements, and building a strong organizational structure. As the Hornets began to show signs of progress, Michael's legacy as a player remained intact. His leadership off the court had proven just as valuable as his performance on it. But his story wasn't just about basketball anymore. Michael became a major figure in the business world, taking on ventures that expanded beyond the sports industry. His endorsement deals, particularly with Nike, had helped build the Air Jordan brand into a global empire. The Air Jordan line of sneakers had become synonymous with excellence, and Michael's partnership with Nike continued to break sales records, making him one of the wealthiest and most influential athletes in history. The success of the Air Jordan brand was about more than just selling shoes. It represented Michael's ability to transcend the sport of basketball. Through his endorsements, his business ventures, and his influence in the cultural landscape, Michael Jordan had become a brand unto himself. His name carried with it the idea of greatness. Whether it was through his shoes, his clothing lines, or his association with other brands, Michael's presence was felt in almost every corner of popular culture. He wasn't just a basketball player, he had become an icon in the truest sense of the word. Even as the game of basketball continued to evolve, with players like LeBron James and Kobe Bryant carrying the torch, Michael remained the benchmark for what it meant to be great. His work ethic, his mentality, and his approach to competition were things that younger generations of players would continue to emulate. His influence on the next generation of superstars was undeniable. LeBron James, in particular, often spoke about how Michael had shaped his approach to the game. Kobe Bryant, another player who came after Michael, admitted that he had modeled his game after Michael's and had always seen him as a mentor. Despite the shift in the NBA landscape, Michael's legacy continued to live on. His place in basketball history was secure, but he also became a symbol of what it meant to push beyond limitations, to set new standards, and to redefine what success looked like. His impact on the sport was lasting, and it was clear that the players who followed in his footsteps were not just striving to be as good as Michael, they were striving to be better. His influence was felt in every aspect of the game, from the way players carried themselves, to the way they approached training, to the expectations placed on them by fans, coaches, and the media. As Michael transitioned further into his post-playing career, his life began to take on new dimensions. Beyond his role as an NBA owner and businessman, he became deeply involved in philanthropy. His charitable efforts focused on education, youth development, and providing opportunities for underprivileged children. His foundation, which had always been a part of his life, grew into a major force for positive change. Michael used his platform to make a difference in ways that went beyond basketball, showing that his legacy wasn't just about winning on the court, it was also about helping others win in life. Michael's legacy continued to expand as he became involved in various aspects of the entertainment industry as well. His appearances in films, such as the cult classic Space Jam, and his involvement in various television projects helped solidify his presence in mainstream pop culture. Michael was no longer just a basketball player, he was a global icon whose influence reached far beyond the court. His ability to cross over into different areas of entertainment demonstrated his far-reaching impact and the versatility of his brand. In 2016, Michael was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, an honor that was the culmination of his illustrious career. The ceremony was a celebration of everything he had accomplished on the basketball court, but it was also a moment of reflection on the incredible journey he had taken. The people who had been a part of his life and career spoke about his relentless drive, his competitiveness, and his ability to inspire others to reach for greatness. It was a moment that acknowledged the profound impact Michael had not just on basketball, but on the world. At the same time, Michael continued to be a voice in the ongoing conversation about the future of the NBA. His insights and experiences were invaluable as the league moved into a new era, with new stars and new challenges. Michael's place in the sport was cemented, not just as a player, but as someone who had helped shape the trajectory of basketball. He had been the driving force behind the global expansion of the NBA, and his influence could still be felt in the game's continued growth. As Michael Jordan moved further into his post-playing career, his story was far from over. His legacy continued to grow and evolve, influencing the generations that followed him. He had changed the game of basketball forever, but he had also changed the way the world saw athletes and success. His life was a testament to the idea that greatness isn't just about winning, it's about striving for excellence in all aspects of life. Michael Jordan's influence on the world was as powerful as ever, and his story would continue to inspire for generations to come. As the years passed, Michael Jordan's name became synonymous with basketball greatness, not only in the NBA but across the globe. His career had spanned decades, from his explosive entrance into the league to his rise as the game's most dominant player. His 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and 10 scoring titles told only part of his story. What was perhaps most significant about Michael's career was the mindset he carried, his fierce competitiveness, his relentless work ethic, and his unyielding desire to be the best, no matter the cost. These qualities were not confined to the basketball court, they followed him into his post-NBA life, where he continued to set new standards of success and influence. After stepping away from the court for the second time in 1999, Michael had already secured a legendary place in the history of basketball. Yet, despite his retirement, he never truly left the sport behind. His involvement with the NBA persisted in various ways, through his ownership of the Charlotte Hornets, his continued mentorship to the next generation of players, and his role as a global ambassador for the game. But Michael's influence extended far beyond basketball, particularly in the worlds of business, culture, and philanthropy. One of the most significant moves he made after his playing career was taking on the role of a team owner. In 2010, Michael became the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets, bringing his competitive spirit and basketball knowledge to a new level. As a team owner, he was no longer the star player, but his experience as one of the greatest players in history gave him a unique perspective on what it took to build a successful franchise. The Hornets, while still working towards their championship aspirations, began to take shape under Michael's leadership. His influence in shaping the culture of the team became evident as he sought to create a winning mentality that went beyond just player performance. Michael's ownership of the Hornets also served as a reminder of how far he had come. The young kid from Wilmington who once struggled to make his high school basketball team was now one of the most influential figures in professional sports. His ownership role demonstrated that Michael's greatness was not confined to his on-court accomplishments. He had found new ways to excel, taking his drive for excellence into the business world. Michael's involvement with the Hornets proved that success didn't stop at the buzzer, it extended into every aspect of his life. At the same time, Michael's influence continued to shape the NBA, even from the sidelines. Young stars like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and others often looked to Michael for inspiration and guidance. His competitive mindset and his commitment to perfection became a model for the next generation of athletes, many of whom tried to emulate his work ethic and approach to the game. Michael's legacy, in this sense, had transcended the limits of his career. He had become an archetype for greatness, and his influence was woven into the very fabric of the NBA. But even as Michael helped guide the next generation of players, he also began to reflect on the impact he had made in the sport. His Hall of Fame induction in 2009 was a culmination of his basketball journey. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes from family, friends, coaches, and fellow players who had been influenced by Michael's career. The night was more than just about awards and accolades. It was a moment to recognize the man who had redefined what it meant to be a champion, both on and off the court. Michael's speech was a testament to his gratitude for the people who helped him along the way, including his family, teammates, and coaches. As the years went by, Michael began to shift his focus to other aspects of his life. His philanthropic efforts gained momentum as he turned his attention toward giving back to the community. Michael's foundation, which had always been a part of his life, expanded its focus to provide educational opportunities for underprivileged children and support for youth sports programs. He used his platform and resources to make a difference, ensuring that the values he had learned through basketball, hard work, perseverance, and determination would be passed on to the next generation. Through his charity work, Michael also sought to foster a sense of community and support for those who needed it the most. His contributions weren't just about giving away money, they were about building relationships and creating lasting change in communities that had been overlooked for far too long. His philanthropic efforts became a key part of his legacy, one that reflected the values he had carried with him throughout his entire career. In addition to his work with the Hornets and his charity efforts, Michael continued to expand his presence in the business world. His role as a global icon led to partnerships with major companies, and he leveraged his brand to influence industries beyond basketball. His success with Nike, particularly with the Air Jordan brand, had made him one of the wealthiest athletes in the world. But Michael didn't just focus on accumulating wealth. He used his platform to advocate for important social causes and create opportunities for others. His voice was respected, and his influence was undeniable. Despite his success, Michael remained grounded, never losing sight of what had made him great in the first place, his love for basketball and the drive to push himself beyond his limits. His accomplishments as an owner, philanthropist, and businessman were impressive, but they never overshadowed his passion for the game. Whether watching from the sidelines or meeting with young players, Michael remained connected to basketball. He found joy in seeing others rise to the challenges he once faced and in watching the game continue to evolve. As the years passed, Michael's presence in the world of sports and culture continued to endure. His role as a mentor and leader remained central to his legacy. He was always there when young athletes needed advice, encouragement, or guidance. And as the NBA continued to evolve, Michael's influence could still be felt in every game, every play, every young player striving to reach the heights he had once reached. Ultimately, Michael Jordan's story is one of more than just success. It is the story of someone who transcended the game of basketball. His competitive spirit, his resilience, and his relentless pursuit of greatness made him the player he was, but it was his ability to inspire others, to change lives, and to continually evolve that cemented his place as one of the most influential figures in the history of sports. Michael Jordan didn't just define an era of basketball, he defined what it means to be great, both on and off the court. His journey, from the kid in Wilmington to the greatest basketball player in history, wasn't just about achieving titles. It was about setting a standard for what it meant to be an athlete and a leader. His legacy is one that will continue to inspire generations to come, proving that greatness is not merely a goal but a mindset that transcends time. Michael Jordan's influence is still felt today, not just through his championships and accolades, but through the indelible mark he left on the world. And in the end, his story was one of passion, perseverance, and the unyielding pursuit of excellence, a legacy that will never fade.